All right, this is a slideshow that we're going to go through the symbols in music, mainly the notes and rests and how they interact together. We're going to start with the note tree or the rest tree, and they kind of mirror each other, which we'll go through a little bit as we learn about each note. So we're going to start at the top with our wholes and then break them down into the parts as we go. So our first notes are our whole notes or whole rest. Whole note is hollow and it's just a circle. The whole rest looks kind of like a hole in the ground. So I like to think about it in terms of that whole hole. We'll get back to that in a second. That's at the top of your tree, and it's kind of the basis for all the other things that we're going to break down into. So the next one it breaks into is the half note. Half note is also hollow, but it has a stem on it. The half rest looks very similar to the whole rest, except it's flipped. So whole, half, hat. That one looks like a hat. Whole, half, hat. So there's one whole, and a whole breaks down into two halves. So there are two half notes or half rests in the whole. After halves, we have quarters. So quarter note looks just like a half note, except it's filled in. And a quarter rest is this zigzag type thing. It looks like a Z connected to a C. We call it a quarter note or quarter rest because it gets a quarter of the whole, just like there are 4 quarters in a whole dollar. So there are 4 in that whole note. 2 of them in a half note, but then 2 half notes in the whole. So the math works out to 4 quarter notes in the whole note, or 4 quarter rests in the whole rest. Next one is eighth note. Looks kind of like a quarter note, but we add this flag. One flag, or on the eighth rest, one little arm sticking out, or one beam. So often the eighth note looks like this, and you can tell it's eighth notes, 2 of them beamed together, because there's only one beam on the top. So one flag, one arm, or one beam, eighth notes. We call them eighth notes because there are 8 of them in the whole note. Quarter notes break down into 2 eighth notes, so your 4 quarter notes times 2 is 8 in your whole. The next ones are 16th notes. They look just like eighth notes, but they have an extra flag, an extra arm on their rests, and when they're beamed together into takademis, they have 2 beams at the top. So going with our math, everything's breaking down into 2s. So 1 times 2, 2, 2 times 2, 4, 4 quarter notes break into 8, so 4 times 2, 8, 8 times 2 is 16. There are 16 16th notes, or 16 16th rests in your wholes. That's how the trees work. Now some notes have dots that don't fit in the tree. So what do we do with dots? Dots have half the value of the note that the dot is on. So this is a dotted quarter note. It's just a quarter note with a dot. It's a dotted quarter rest with a dot. If we're trying to find out how long that dotted quarter note is, we have to take half the value of the note itself. So the note itself is just a quarter note. Let's say that's worth 1. We have to add half of that value, because that's what the dot does. So half of 1 is a half. Or if we use our tree, half of a quarter note breaks into 2 eighth notes. We can look at it either way, and we add it together. 1.5 beats is what that dotted quarter would get. So we need a couple more of those. Dotted half notes look like half notes with a dot. Dotted half rests are your half hat with a dot. So we take our regular note, which is a half note. Let's say it's worth 2. We add half the value. So 2 divided in half divided by 2 is 1. Half of a half note on our tree breaks down to 2 quarter notes. We add them together, that makes 3. Dotted eighth notes are an eighth note with a dot. Dotted eighth rests are an eighth rest with a dot. You'll sometimes see these looking like this. They're usually with a 16th note, or the 16th notes first. So just so you know, they can be barred too. Trying to find how long the eighth rest is. It's a little bit trickier when we have shorter values because we have to use fractions. Okay, so your eighth note without the dot, we just have an eighth note. Let's say it's worth a half. We still have to add half of that value. So half of a half is a fourth. And half of your eighth notes break into 2 16th notes. So either way, doing the math, we add it together. A half and a fourth is 3/4. which makes sense because we have Tommy, Tommy, or Takadimi, Takadimi. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3/4. Using all the things that we just learned, we're going to do some kind of story problems or word problems so you really understand how things go together. If a quarter note is worth 1 beat, what would a half note be worth then? Okay, so if you don't remember, you have to go back to your tree, find your quarter notes and your half notes. We know that our quarter notes are worth 1, and there are 2 quarter notes in that half. So we're going to add those together. Half notes are worth 2. If a quarter note is worth 2 beats, let's say, what would a half note be worth? Same process. Find your quarters, find your halves. This time quarters are worth 2. There are 2 quarters in your half. Add them together, 4. 4 in your half. If a quarter note is worth 2 beats, what is your whole note worth? So we already know this. You can either jump and just do 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. Okay, so that I would know that's 8. Or I can work up like we just did. 2 plus 2, I know a half note's 4. So then 2 half notes, 4 plus 4 is 8. Either way, it's just math all the way up, figuring out how many notes fit into each kind, and then taking those notes times 2. If a quarter note is worth 2 beats, what is an eighth note worth? So now we're working the other way. Again, your quarter note we're going to say is 2 for right now, but we're not adding those because we're going down. So we have to divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Then you can double check. 1 plus 1 is 2, correct. Works the same way with rest. If a quarter rest is worth 2 beats, what is an eighth rest worth? Same thing. So the rests always mirror the notes. They're going to be the exact same value in any given part of a piece of music. A little bit different of a problem. How many quarter notes is inside a whole note? Okay, so first you have to find your whole note on your tree, or a half note, not whole note, excuse me, half note on your tree. Then you have to look how many quarter notes are divided with the little arrows into that half note. We have 1, 2. 2 quarter notes and a half note. How many quarter notes fit inside a whole note now? Find your whole note. Okay, we don't go directly to quarter notes, so you can either go, okay, and I have 2, those break down into 2, so 2 times 2 times 2, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so you can either think through all of those things, or you can just look directly down at the quarter note line. You have 4. Okay, how many eighth notes fit inside a half note? Same thing. So you're skipping that quarter line to get to your eighth notes to eventually get back to your half note. So first find your half note, then you count how many eighth notes are in it. 4 eighth notes in your half note. So in my head, when I do this, I think, okay, I have 2 eighth notes in a quarter, so that's 2, and 2 quarters in your half. That's another 2, so 2 times 2 is 4. You can do it either way. Awesome, so we've made it to the end of this note video, so now I'm going to show you what you're doing on Google Classroom. So you're going to go to your classroom, whichever one's yours. I'm in the 8th grade Treble right now, and then go to the classwork tab, and then find the symbol identification. There will be a form there. You're going to click on the form. It looks like this, and then you click on next, and then you start taking the quiz. Now there are drop downs for your answers, so make sure you look at those, and I'll choose the correct answer for those. There are 3 different sections, naming the notes, and then doing the 2 different kinds of application that we did. Once you're done with that, you'll click submit, and that's all you got to do for this. Thank you very much.